something that he goes to at UT. Every Friday, he goes to a science.
Actual
that.
temperature or wind chill?
They live like that. How do vehicles and operate? Yeah.
They put,
Chargers,
yeah,
I told you
they put
I
a
said-
heater on the block.
He's insane.
Plug in our tractors, you know, because diesel doesn't start well when it's cold.
Oops. Yeah, that one works.
That wasn't electric, right?
I'd like to call the February 19th, 2015 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. We'll start out with citizens forum. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Move on to the approval of the minutes, January 15th, 2015 minutes.
Offer a motion for approval?
All those in favor? Move on to discussion and public hearing on the re-subdivision plat of Lot 3 of the Smith property, parcel 59 and 59.07, tax map 152, 11-739 Turkey Creek Road, and parcel 015, Group B, tax map 153I, zoned R-1 and R-1 OSMR. 16.4 acres, Saddlebrook Properties LLC applicant.
This property is to the immediate west of what was the villas at Anchor Park and now Briarstone subdivision off Turkey Creek Road, across from Anchor Park. And basically, this is a very minor re-subdivision plat that involves some shifting of property lines that actually affects 3 different properties. Basically, in the area that I circled is where it's involved. And for some reason, when this was originally, these lot lines were originally created, there were some weird configurations, and I think it dealt with some of the discussions between the property owners at that time. And so really what they're trying to do is clean up the property lines and make the properties more functional and usable. So it's relatively minor plat. The comments, there's 6 comments that were at your places, and they're all relatively minor. They will be submitting a rezoning plat for March that would basically make sure that the zoning districts reflect the adjusted property lines, because in the town we require zoning lines to follow property lines. So provided the 6 subject tos are addressed at your places, the staff recommends approval.
One here with the applicant. Does anybody have any comments that you,
No, this is basically, as he said, just
can
cleaning
you
up.
tell us who you are?
Yeah, I'm Russ Rackley with Rackley Engineering. This is basically cleaning up what was some really kind of messy property lines. So it's a property line swap between Saddlebrook Development and Smith, and then what you'll see on the next plat, the Lorenz property, and making all the property more contiguous and eliminating where the property line doubled back and there was slivers of ones and the others overlapping. So we're just trying to clean it up, and it's everybody involved. The 3 parties are all on board and happy with this. And I did submit a rezoning application for next month to correct the zoning lines based on the approval of this plat and then the property adjustments on the next item.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Move for approval subject to the 6 stipulations.
And you're all right with the 6 stipulations?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose? Move on to item number 4, is discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Phase 1 of Briarstone subdivision, formerly the Villas at Anchor Park subdivision property, located on the north side of Turkey Creek Road, across from the Anchor Park, parcel 34, tax map 153I, Group B, zoned R-1, OSMR, 22 lots, 9.8 acres, Saddlebrook Properties LLC applicant.
This property, of course, was originally the villas at Anchor Park, across from Anchor Park on Turkey Creek Road. And as you recall, they rezoned the property. Originally, the developers were going to construct duplexes on the villas at Anchor Park, and when it was sold to a different developer, they wanted to go to detached dwelling units, so they rezoned it to R1 OSMR, which would allow both attached and detached, since there was already an attached unit constructed as part of the villa's development. In August, the Planning Commission approved a concept plan for the entire Briarstone subdivision and a preliminary plat for Phase 1 of Briarstone. That plat basically involved regrading the building pads so that they would accommodate the single-family detached structures that the new developer is going to be constructing on the property rather than the duplexes. It also involves some utility modifications. And since that approval, they've been working in the field doing the grade work, and now they're presenting the final plat for the first phase. It includes 22 house lots and 2 open space lots. The remaining comments are at your places. There were 10 comments, but for the most part, they're all, some of them are just reminders, like providing a letter of credit, completing the buffer strip, things like that. So none of the remaining comments were significant. In fact, the surveyor just gave me the corrections. Obviously, I haven't looked at them yet, but I don't believe they have any comments or concerns about the staff's remaining items. So we recommend approval subject to those 10 items being addressed.
More comments?
No, we're happy with the recommendation for approval subject to comments.
And you're okay with the 10 and either
Yeah.
already submitted the
Yep.
correction? Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
I'll move it if approved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you all. Discussion and public hearing on preliminary plat for Hanover Court subdivision located on Old Stage Road at the South Watt Road intersection, parcel 94.02, 94.03, tax map 151, zoned R-1. Oh, did you? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get us out of here tonight.
I got you.
Ready to go home?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Thank you. Okay, we'll start again on item number 5, discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for Hanover Court subdivision located on Old Stage Road at South Watt Road intersection, parcel 94.02 and 94.03, tax map 151, zoned R-1 and R-4. 36 lots, 9.87 acres, Matthew Sergel applicant.
This property, as I'm sure most of you know, is just to the south of the Icarium at the intersection of South Watt Road and Old Stage Road. It was originally approved as a preliminary plat back in 2007, and they were going to develop it as quadplexes and duplexes. And basically, they did get the road completed to the binder stage. They completed most of the utilities and most of the grading, rough grading at least, the stormwater detention basin and the storm sewer system. They have not yet completed the surface course on the roads nor the pedestrian facilities, the sidewalks internal to the development or the walking trails. The project actually kind of became idle for a number of years due largely to market issues, and now someone's interested in reactivating the project and constructing duplexes on the property. As you all know, since 2007, Old Stage Road was improved through that section, and South Watt Road was extended. So the infrastructure system's also a lot better now for that development to, be reactivated. The preliminary plat before you retains the original 34 units that were approved in 2007. Obviously, they're, the building envelopes are reconfigured to accommodate duplexes, but it does keep the same density. It also includes some regrading that will need to occur to accommodate the different building pads. And then there needs to be some decision made on the walking trails. There's a walking trail that has always been shown that ties into South Watt Road, and that connection there from the end of the cul-de-sac. They are, however, requesting to remove the northeastern connection that was originally shown, that basically it went in that direction. Those, basically both of those stub into house lots, and there are pretty significant topographic issues out there. The staff initially had recommended that they consider taking a trail down and stub it into the Icerium property, because that would be a more likely property to, potentially connect to their development at some future point. But again, that is a relatively steep section through there, so their request before you is to not have the walking trail connection on that portion of the property for topographic reasons. The sidewalks are basically shown. They will be constructed, as I understand it, while the units are constructed. As you all know, the pedestrian facilities along Old Stage Road and South Watt Road were constructed as part of the road improvement projects. So the big decision is, what you all feel should be the recommendation on the walking trails. There's also 16 comments on the preliminary plat, but similar to the previous project, most of these are, clerical comments or things that should be very easy to address, reminders, things like that. The biggest item is just a decision to be made on the walking trail on the northeast portion of the development.
Mark, what does that stub into right now? Is it just a vacant lot there?
Well, there's nothing there, but it would stub into, as originally approved, it would stub into 2 house lots.
When this was originally approved, I think a couple of those houses on Hobbs Road had not been built yet.
Yeah, that's true.
I think we kind of know what the future development's going to be, and it doesn't appear like it's going to be a traditional subdivision. It's just going to be some lots that have been parceled off that all front Hobbs Road.
Yes.
So with that being said, I can't really see that this walking trail would have any potential to ever tie into anything, being that, I think, matter of fact, that lot 2, I think, just had a house built on it, and doesn't lot 1 have a house under construction
I
currently
think
on it?
so, yeah. I believe that's right.
Is that right, Richard?
That's correct. You're saying exactly what I was going to say if given the opportunity.
Richard, tell us who you are again.
Richard LeMay. I'm here representing Mr. Sturgill.
With that being said, without any future opportunity to really tie that walking trail into any potential development in the future, which we would otherwise require, I can't see any reason for that walking trail to be there. Again, the lot's changed in 6 to 7 years.
That's why I mentioned the only reasonable connection would be to the Icerium property, but it is a pretty, steep drop-off there. But that one could potentially, I could see that actually being a reasonable connection at some point in the future.
I definitely think the Watt Road tie-in is a no-brainer.
Yes.
Especially since we have the pedestrian facilities already there on Watt Road. Trying to think what it looks like back there behind Cool Sports. I mean, isn't there a drainage way and some other things that
Yeah,
somebody'd have to
yes.
get real creative to try to,
Yeah, it'd be a challenging tie-in, yeah.
There's I'm just guessing and don't hold me to it, I think 21 feet to 25 feet difference in elevation from the end of our cul-de-sac down to where you enter the flat part of the ice-area property. Just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
put that in perspective, like are we dealing with a 2-to-1, 3-to-1?
It wouldn't be quite 3-to-1, I don't believe. But it would have to be worked on to become 4-to-1, which is, really what
You'd
people
almost
shoot
have to
for.
zigzag across it and put some
Right,
switchbacks
but
in it to make anything usable.
And since this development's been in place, Mr. Sturgill had a bit of a challenge. You see the drainage coming off the end of that cul-de-sac and the riprap, that is there. That's been a bit of a challenge. He's got it stabilized now, but it's a very steep area, and I really don't see what it would serve. If you look at South Hobbs Road has a sidewalk on the opposite side of the road, which eventually will be connected into Old Stage Road. There's sidewalks all along Old Stage Road, fronting this property as well as the Hobbs property. It continues, goes all the way to Kingston Pike along the South Watt Road extension. Once you come internal to our subdivision with the sidewalks, it just appears to me there's plenty of opportunity for people to get outdoors in this area if they choose to, without having to try to overcome a steep bank to get down to the back of the ice-area property, which really would go nowhere except through their parking lot, and then back into this same bike path that's existing on the extension of Watt Road. I just don't see it to be a very feasible option, both from an engineering standpoint as well as helping the community out with their walking needs.
Richard, how did you, that area where you've got that catch basin that goes down to the riprap, are you over detaining in the detention pond to mitigate
Yes.
having? Okay,
That's correct.
that's how you did that.
Right.
It's a little unusual to see that. Obviously, you got the energy dissipation in there, trying to figure that out, but that makes sense.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
I don't think it's a good idea to put a walking trail through a parking lot, if that's what the change would be.
Well, there's a buffer between their parking lot and this property. There's actually two buffer strips that the connection, if it were ever to happen, would bisect. Again, it probably would be unlikely, but I think if you're looking for the most potentially reasonable connection, it would be to that property because of the nature of its use. But again, there are valid topographic issues out there.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I could conceive, although I have I can't think of how steep that is. I'm very visual, but I can conceive kids coming down Old Stage from over and taking this cul-de-sac and riding their bikes over to the Icearium. So I can see that, but I'm thinking there's no way they'd get back up that hill unless they would walk up that hill. And it sounds like that's quite a steep hill, almost like
It is. That's why if you've driven down the extension of Watt Road and seen the large retaining wall that they had to build in order to stabilize the Watt Road extension, that's the change of grade you're looking at.
Yeah.
It's a fairly severe change of grade.
Can't see a need for that walking trail on that east cul-de-sac. I think the west cul-de-sac makes sense tying into Watt Road, but I just can't see it on the east cul-de-sac.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a walking trail that's too steep to be usable. We got one going from Harvey Road into the back of whatever it is, with split rail, you could up there.
So I guess with that being said, I'd like to make a motion for approval, subject to the plan as presented, as well as the 16 items. I don't think there's one particular item that addresses that walking trail. You just needed some direction. Is that right, Mark, on the walking trail?
Yeah, since it was a reduction from what was originally
Right.
approved, we didn't feel comfortable
I I understand that.
you know, saying you didn't have to do it. That needed to be a decision made by the commission.
Second it?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Richard, for that one.
Thank you.
We got
Mr. Sturgill, if you happen to find your curb irons, let me know, because I think that same thief has a bunch of my curb irons. So that, and Bud McKelvey's trying some ways, some creative ways to figure out how to get those curb irons from walking off. Because I can't tell you how many the town has lost over the past few years. It's a real shame that that's happened. It's cost you and the taxpayers a lot of money.
Move on to item number 6, discussion and public hearing on the final plat for Hanover Court subdivision located on Old Stage Road at the South Watt Road intersection, parcels 94.02, 94.03, tax map 151, zoned R-1 and R-4, 36 lots, 9.87 acres. Matthew Sturgill, LLC applicant.
On this item, the staff is recommending to postpone action on it because they still have a fair amount of work to do in the field, namely build the walking trail. Now that we know which walking trails they need to construct, and they need to do some stabilization out there to bring it up to the standard where it's ready to be acted on by the Planning Commission to be consistent with what we've done with other applicants that come before you with final plats. So with that, the staff would recommend postponement. Hopefully this will be back on the agenda next month when the field items are much further along.
Applicant having comments? You're all right with that? And the items to be,
We're all right with the items that are going to be presented. I'm not really all right with postponing it, but there's no option to that, so we'll accept that.
okay. Do I have a motion?
Move for postponement.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We'll see you next month then. Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on amendment to the text of the Farragut zoning ordinance, Chapter 3, Section 12, General Commercial District C-1, subsection F, mixed-use town center, as it relates to drive-throughs.
Okay, guess you all thought we were finished with the mixed-use town center. That's okay. That's what we're here for. Basically, as you know, recently the Board of Mayor and Aldermen did approve 4 different ordinances related to the mixed-use town center. All of them, of course, came through the Planning Commission. Some of them we discussed at multiple meetings, including Ordinance 14-21, which reflected changes to the general commercial zoning district for properties that are within the mixed-use town center area as shown on the future land use map. As you all know, one of probably the biggest topic of discussion related to that ordinance was the question of whether a drive-through should be provided for in the mixed-use town center, and if so, what would be the parameters that we would be comfortable with. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen did go ahead and approve all the ordinances on second reading, but they did ask the staff to prepare some wording to come back to the Planning Commission and revisit the drive-through discussion. We've had a couple of developers that are interested in doing something with some properties in our mixed-use town center, and my understanding is they can meet all the requirements that are provided for in that ordinance 1421 with the exception of the drive-through exclusion. So they're asking that be revisited. One of the, and this is very conceptual, but this is the Silver Spoon property. This is one of the projects that they're looking at doing, and as you can see, the building is up close to the street, and my understanding they can satisfy, again, as I mentioned earlier, the parameters in the new ordinance. But they would like to have the opportunity for a drive-through. The way this particular site is laid out, the drive-through, obviously, you'd come in, and it would operate something like that, and go back out. So, it would be relatively hidden. And in terms of the parameters that were included in your packet, many of these we already have looked at when the drive-through discussion was evaluated back in October as part of the ordinance. But again, we're adding this back for your consideration. We did provide one additional bullet point, that is that and this was per Alderman Hawkins' suggestion, that the property is a lot of record that has existing frontage on a street classified as a major arterial on the major road plan. That would further narrow the list of candidates that may qualify for, a drive-through. And it would also, they're already abutting a major roadway. So the thought was that, a vehicular-oriented site design element like a drive-through may, with certain parameters, not be that out of character. So that was kind of the thought with adding that. The other parameters, again, we've mostly already looked at. It would limit it to one lane, that it be basically hidden as much as possible in the rear of the building. We're proposing a 12-square-foot menu board. I know one of the applicants may request that to be discussed. That the board actually be very hidden. It'd either be mounted on the building or on a screen wall or screened by plant material, so it is not evident. That the entrance and exit don't directly go to a public street, that they access the parking area and service drive, and then that there's minimal disruption between the vehicular and pedestrian travel, because again, the mixed-use town center is, the character and intent of that area is to be a pedestrian-oriented, pedestrian-focused plan of development. The staff has consistently felt that drive-throughs are not consistent. They're not really consistent with the character and intent of the mixed-use town center. But I do think that if you all feel that they should be, provided for, the parameters before you provide a lot of limitations, I think, that would help protect the character and intent of the mixed-use town center.
Go back to the drawing, Mark, please. Do you think people are going to follow that?
Well, I don't know. Some of them will, some of them won't.
They'll come right down the other way, and everybody's going to have to cross traffic.
Many of them, of course, will come in at the first point. I'm sure they'll.
Mm-hmm.
Which, to get to the drive-through, would be a potential problem with pedestrian vehicular conflict.
Big conflict. Can we change in number 6 the word minimize to avoid?
We can do that if that's what you all wish. That's an easy change for me.
You think of any place that has a drive-through, there's always some, either in the entrance or the exit of it, there's some conflict with pedestrians. So by putting a void in there, are you basically just making it impossible to have one?
Well, is avoid a stronger word than minimize? To avoid can...
Well, and you can design some things in the, the access ways, raised pedestrian crosswalks, things like that. Some of those are out at Parkside Drive and different developments that visually and structurally alert you to an area of potential pedestrian crossing. So I think there's things you can do in the design that would minimize vehicular pedestrian conflict. You're always going to have a little bit potentially anytime a pedestrian has to cross an access way, and that happens in a traditional parking lot. I mean, that happens in pretty much any situation where you have somebody parked in a parking lot that needs to access the front of a building. There's always a potential point where there could be a conflict between the pedestrian and the person in the vehicle.
And this particular property, you're talking about one lane in, and you take that same lane out? That creates a problem in itself.
Again, this is very conceptual, but I don't believe their intent is to have I think it's a two-way. The applicant can speak to that, but I think it would be two-way at both access points.
I have to say, I am not a fan of drive-throughs. However, this lot has been empty for a long, long time. So the fact that somebody is interested in doing something here, I think it's worth taking a second look at, for sure. And it looks like, I know this is conceptual, but it looks like, too, the buildings will be close to the road. Yes. So, which we, of course, wanted as part of the plan. So, do we know what the restaurant is? Do we have an idea what it is?
I can't speak to that.
And is it both of these buildings, or is it just, what is this other building down here that doesn't have the drive-through?
I'll let the applicant talk about that.
Tell us who you are
Yes, ma'am.
and an
I'm
address.
I'm Clint Wolford with Wolford Development. I'm out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. As far as naming the tenant right now, I'm not in a position to do that. Lease isn't signed and it's not ready to be a public record, but once that's done, we'll definitely be glad to do that. I would say that I'd be surprised if you wouldn't be happy with who it is. It is a national, I think it's fair for me to go ahead and say it's a national coffee house, and I'll stop at that. As far as the question that you asked about the two-way traffic and one-way traffic, I think the idea of the single lane, and I'm not speaking for Mark, but I think what he's really talking about is you got a single lane that's coming into the drive-through. That's not necessarily limiting the entire parking lot in certain areas or situations to a single lane. You wouldn't be able to have proper traffic flow in and out of the property just by nature of the way that the lot's laid out with the parking stalls and that kind of thing. I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to limit those cars that are coming out of the drive-through from coming through that first exit or entranceway into the site there. Originally, that was a little less pronounced there where the sidewalk and the curb and stuff come out, and we discussed it and decided that we would try to get that out a little bit further to force them to go that way. I don't think it's realistic, frankly, in any situation that you're ever going to be able to predict what people are going to do. Unfortunately, I mean, I think we've all seen it. There are people that just have their own mind. They're going to do whatever it is. I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see somebody just go over the curb there and just try to go down straight, to be honest with you. But the good news is that is a short drive out of there. So in terms of a vehicle picking up speed, like you might see a lot of times on a ring road of a shopping mall, that's not going to happen. It's going to be slow traffic moving through there. I just think at any time that you've got a parking area, and somebody said it earlier, I think you've got a situation you're always going to have conflict with pedestrians. You just can't get rid of it unless you just don't have a parking lot at all. And I don't know that that's realistic if you're trying to create a shopping gathering place.
I wonder if it would it, and I don't know if this would work or not, but instead of having the exit after the drive-through go straight, could there be a way to build up and again, may be a stupid idea, but build up some sort of a retaining wall that takes people back around the loop and out the way they came in to avoid coming into this, I don't know, it's hard for me to, coming into the parking area, I guess. So it looks like a P. If you're like a sideways, so you're going out and they're coming back out the other way. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying.
Like this
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
That way, everything goes in
So they're-
and out the same way.
I think I know what you're talking about. They come back through where we've got kind of the planting area there, and it goes back, and you've got the cut through, so to speak, there.
Correct.
We kind of, the whole idea of that cut through being there was actually for some of these other people that may be coming out to come through, or if a person came in and came down that drive aisle and they had no intention of going into the drive-through, they had a valve or an outlet to get out of there.
Got it.
Without getting trapped.
Feeling trapped in a parking lot.
True.
I think what we need to keep in mind here is we're really talking about a more of a philosophical
Sure.
idea of being able to address.
Yeah.
These 6 items really narrow this down considerably. And I applaud the staff for wordsmithing these 6 items because I couldn't have come up with a better 6 items myself. But I think what we got to keep in mind is we're not at the site plan stage. We're talking
Right.
generally speaking.
Yep.
Quite frankly, this is the first time I've seen this plan. I think it's a remarkable plan that addresses these items. Again, you're never going to be able to predict what everybody does.
Right.
And the reason being, you can go in any time you go to Kroger and see how many people just stop in the fire lane to get out of their car and go in and do their shopping. It's amazing. And that's even when the weather's good, they do that. So there are going to be some people that don't follow the rules, but generally speaking, I could have never come up with a plan as good as that to be able to keep a drive-through as disguised as well as this has, and to reduce the amount of pedestrian conflicts.
I have to say, I find this location much more palatable than where it was originally proposed at the old gas station, because I could see the backup onto Kingston Pike. And it sounds like with this language that have we taken that particular property out of consideration for a drive-through?
No, because it would satisfy the.
It would qualify.
Would it?
Yes, it would
Okay.
qualify.
And
Presented
it's
the
going to
building
have its
closer
unique
to the
challenges
back
and
edge of the
opportunities, but I think it could be done to satisfy these parameters.
These are not easy parameters. These
No.
6 items are pretty challenging for most businesses with any kind of a drive-through. So we're definitely not making it easy. We're making it possible with some creative design and creative landscaping. But we're definitely not, in my mind, it's probably the only time it'll ever get used. I can't really see, matter of fact, I've been thinking about parcels that would qualify up and down Kingston Pike or on Campbell Station that's in our mixed-use town center zone. And I'm having a real challenging time to think if this will even ever come up again. Quite frankly, without getting into too much detail with the site, I think it's an awesome opportunity for an albatross if we have an opportunity, especially if we have a developer that's willing to jump through our hoops architecturally.
agreed.
That's a big deal. I mean, we've always felt like this is a key intersection in the town and a gateway to our downtown town center someday. And I think this is a great step in the right direction. And I can't see anything. I understand Miss Betty had some concerns with pedestrian conflicts, but you're going to have, if it's a coffee house without a drive-through, you're going to have those same people that just pull up, park in the fire zone, and they're going to create pedestrian conflicts just as much as anybody else. I think that does a heck of a good job of trying to get people in and out. They may come in the wrong entrance the first time, but my thought is once they know the system and they're going for their 7:30 in the morning coffee, they're going to come in the right way and go out the right way because that's the most efficient way of doing it. I'm sure they'll make some mistakes in the beginning.
Personally, for me, and I'm just being completely honest, for me, it's been about, when you think about drive-throughs, it's the perception of what that looks like. It's the Burger Kings, it's the Taco Bells, it's the quick-serve restaurants that, again, it's sort of the brand, to me, diminishes, and I'm not sure how to articulate this, but in the town of Farragut, and we're trying, Farragut, the type of town Farragut is, and the high income level and everything, to me, that just seems to downgrade. No offense to those brands, but that just to me seems to downgrade the idea of a downtown for us. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not articulating it very well, but a coffee house to me, is different. And I know that's splitting hairs, but it's, to
I
me,
agree, it
it's
is different. The problem is, we really don't have the authority to say, well, we're gonna allow a coffee house, but we're
understand.
not gonna allow a Crystal Burger.
Totally understand.
Even though I think we're thinking along the same lines, but I really do think those 6 items have made it so arduous for somebody else to be able to jump through those hoops in the future. I'd be really surprised if someone would be willing to do it, whether it's a bank, fast food, or a drugstore.
Well, one of the things with me on this corner as opposed to the other corner is that it is, the entrance to this development is a little bit farther away from Kingston Pike. I really worry about coming in and out of that other corner with the traffic there, and at least there is a somewhat of a buffer there to get onto Campbell Station South. The other one, for something like a drive-through, to me is or anything that you're not going to park and get out and sit there for a little while, coming and going from that other intersection is just very difficult. Like I said, I used to buy gas there and we quit because we couldn't get in and out. It was dangerous, we thought.
It's a block down there, so, I mean, it's not that, I think if you're going to have a drive-through in there, this proposal is probably the best thing. And so, in my opinion, it's either yes or no on the drive-through period. So, and when I was thinking about other places that have drive-ins, you look at the Einstein Bagel Shop, which is about as close as you can get to a coffee shop as there is, and it's got a very convoluted drive-through in there. He probably didn't even know they had a drive-in there.
I think the one thing about this piece of property too, that you keep in mind is there's, in the highest spot, there's probably somewhere between 15 and 20 feet difference in elevation between Kingston Pike and where the finished floor elevation is of these buildings. And about where that drive-through sitting, it's sitting down at the bottom of that hill. And I think my architect, Phil Roy, has done a very nice job creating a trellis system, a trellis system that kind of hangs over it, kind of protects it. We've got some landscaping, it kind of screens it, and I think we've done a pretty good job. I quite frankly, I think it'll disappear. You know, like you just said with Einstein Bagel, I don't think you'll ever know it's there when it's all said and done.
I have a question, Mark. What does, and I'm getting technical here, when it says the entrance and exit to where did it say? The drive-through lane shall not separate, I'm sorry, it's in here somewhere. The drive-through lane shall not be directly connected to a public street. What defines the drive-through lane in that sense? From the beginning of where the ordering board is to the exit, or what's a drive-through lane?
Well, in this context, this way, so it's directing you back into the parking lot, which meets that criteria. It's circling you around. Part of Philip's design guides you to that decision, because of that jut out there, which is a very good design element, because that is really intended, that's there to meet that division, basically.
Okay.
That's another one of those obstacles that's going to make it difficult for somebody to be able to put a drive-through in. And I'm trying to think of McDonald's to a certain degree. You look about where their drive-through enters and exits. I mean, as soon as you pull in the parking lot, you're in the drive-through lane. And that's what we're trying to eliminate, is really trying to encourage people to get out of your car and go in. But if you have to use the drive-through, there is the opportunity to use the drive-through.
Well, that's what I'm asking is, I want to know if we know what the definition of the beginning and the end of the drive-through lane. So it sounds like to me, we define that as where the beginning of that circle starts and where it ends, because once after you leave that, you are technically in the parking lot.
But the way he's got it designed, that drive-through lane, basically, to me, it goes pretty much all the way through, because he's forcing you to make that, for most people. Yeah, there'll be some people that'll drive over it, I'm sure, but that's a very good design. When I saw that, I was like, that's really a great
Put some big
element
boulders there, and they won't drive
because it
over it.
really gets you to, yeah, you could do that. That would deter them from making that jump of the curb, but yeah, and that would be your drive-through lane, so it's directing you through the parking lot.
Coffee shop
That also
with
helps
spikes.
make it, less noticeable. Traffic flow is less focused on a drive-through lane. It's more channeled back into the parking lot, and those cars kind of disappear with the rest of the parking lot.
Okay, it all works for this, but our ordinance applies to the whole area of the town of Farragut. Are we comfortable with this other places?
I think the addition of number 1, I think that was a key for me to.
Yeah, I mean, that limits it even further.
That was genius.
Well, it seems to me, when we read all this, really, the only two properties that this could be on is this one and the one catty corner.
Well, it could
And-
be on other properties. I mean, it certainly could.
You could, the old Burger King would
Everything's
qualify for this.
redeveloped.
It's on its own separate parcel, which is now what's the name of the Mexican restaurant? The Azul Cafe or Azul Tequila?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was one that
And that's an MUTC?
yes.
Okay.
And every site's going to be different. There's going to be a different design and layout. I think a lot of the elements that Philip's got in this design certainly could be translated to other drive-through designs, should there be other ones in the mixed-use town center.
I guess what I'm saying, I like this plan, and I like this. My concern is always going to go back to the other one. Are we addressing the potential? Because I can see having a drive-through on that piece of property and it feeding out onto Kingston Pike in the morning and just being a nightmare.
And which piece of property are you talking
Well,
about?
it wouldn't meet the
Old gas
parameters if
station.
it did that.
So this is beautiful. I think what they've come up with, I have no issues with this. I'm trying to think of the bigger picture for how we apply
If they designed
this.
it like you described it, it wouldn't meet this criteria, and it wouldn't be.
That's exactly
Right.
right. I don't think that the property diagonally across, you could design it and meet these 6 items. Now, I could be wrong, but I think the catch-all in there is the entrance and exit to the drive-through leads to a parking or service drive. The drive-through lane shall not be directly connected to a public street. And that parcel is so much smaller, it's going to be really difficult for that parcel to be able to access a drive-through. Because no matter if you're on Kingston Pike or Campbell Station, if they have a drive-through, you're going to be put into the drive-through lane whether you like it or not. And so I think it's going to be, again, very difficult to try to be able to duplicate this on another parcel. Not impossible, but difficult.
It's going to require thought and,
A lot of creativity.
yes, okay,
Design, for
all right.
sure.
That's all,
That-
that's my
Across the
major
street,
concern, is
they
that we
had
don't
it
have
going
Kingston
behind the
Pike
building.
issues.
If I may, on that piece of property, as a developer, and I analyze it, the problems that property has, you basically have a right-in, right-out situation on Kingston Pike, on Campbell Station.
Yep.
You're not going to have certain types of tenants. I mean, that's going to be somebody that, I can't even think, I mean, maybe a clinic of some sort or something like that might want to go on that site. Somebody that's not driven by traffic constantly all day long. And I think from a fast food perspective, if you're concerned about that, I can't think of, throughout the country where I've been, I can't think of many situations, if any, where I've seen a fast food restaurant that's up on the main
Corner
right-of-way,
of
or
the-
thoroughfare,
yeah.
if we will, Kingston Pike and Campbell Station. I just can't think of one.
And to be honest with you, I have, I guess from a planning standpoint, you would have an issue with fast food places, but I personally don't. My concern is traffic going to get stuck out on Kingston Pike, and that is my concern with that particular piece of property, so I appreciate what you're
But
saying.
I think we've got a great situation
Yeah.
here because we've got a secondary road
I
that we have
agree.
to come off
I
onto
agree.
and
That's what
out
does
of.
it, for sure.
And you can get to a light if necessary, which is great. You got to meander around, but you can get over to Municipal Center Drive and get to a light if you need
Yep.
to.
Yeah,
I think one of caution, I think, it's not, I don't know what can't deal with in the wording here, but caution for staff and future actions is the concern over what this applies to a lot. If somebody came in to make this into 3 lots, you'd have 3 of those in this. You know, that's the kind of thing you gotta watch out in the future.
Well, that would be eliminated, because that's to be a lot of record as
That's
of
why I
the
put that
date
wording in
of the
there.
second reading of the board, mayor, and alderman. So if it's further subdivided, it would be eliminated.
That's specifically why I've got that wording in there, a lot of record that has existing
No, if
frontage.
it's already 3 lots, it would qualify.
That would only, that would not
But if you start doing.
relate to anybody that subdivides after that point. It's an existing lot of record.
Do we have any more questions or comments?
Did it say an existing lot of record there? Instead
Does.
of, it says
The
a lot.
property is a lot
Oh,
of
okay.
record. That has,
Like we'll throw it out there. Eddie's property, if it was developed and re-subdivided, it would not qualify for this.
that's right.
I mean, I'm just gonna throw it out there because that's what I'm thinking in the back of my mind is ultimately that's where we're hoping a core of the downtown might go.
Yep. Yeah, the lot of record wording
Because
limits it
would
even
not be a
further.
lot of record.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Are you saying Eddie's property wouldn't qualify because?
If it was further subdivided, it would not be a lot of record.
Record of the time of the,
Well, the time that the board,
Board,
mayor, and
mayor,
alderman
alderman act.
ratified on second reading, which could conceivably be in a month or 2.
I don't know if this is appropriate time or not, but Mark did mention it earlier, something I had requested when he sent these to me and said, can you live with these? Is this something that makes sense to you, and can you all design what you need to design within these parameters? And I asked at that time, I think it was via email, if we could change the 12 square feet to 15 square feet on the sign. And I don't know if this is the appropriate time to even address that, but I thought I'd do it now.
This is definitely the time.
Yeah, that's
these-
definitely appropriate.
That's part of what this is. The
That's up
ordinance
to
that we're
you
working
all.
on.
I mean, that's,
I say no.
Show me the difference.
3x4 or 3x5.
Exactly.
I mean, I wish
Or
we had
4 by
something-
3 or whatever.
Something to represent that as something. I mean, one of the flags, that might be a 3x5 or.
Well, this door's a 3.0 door right here by 7 feet, so it's 3 feet wide.
Well, that's actually 21 square
Oh.
feet.
These are 8.5 by 11, so it's an inch shy of a foot. So 3 of these, right, basically?
I mean,
I don't have an issue with
I don't have an
going
issue
from
with
12
that.
to 15.
The only thing I would say is if you get it too small, I mean, you're really kind of defeating the purpose of even having the drive-through in the first place if they can't read it. And that's the only reason. I don't even know if 15, I started thinking about it and I thought, yeah, it just seems kind of small. So I just asked for a small increase. It's only, don't really have any kind of basis behind it. I didn't study drive-through menu boards necessarily, but it just seemed kind of small to me.
It does make a good point. This door, the slab of the door is 21 square feet. Now, obviously, you would probably have a reader board that was more horizontal than you would
Right,
vertical.
Anything that big.
No, and I'm not saying that big is appropriate. I'm just saying I'm trying to put it in scale
yeah.
so we can visualize it.
If it's a 3-foot door, you're talking something that's about that wide by that tall if they decided they were going to go 3 feet by 5 feet. I don't think they're going to go 3 by 5. It's going to be something that's a little bit wider personally.
Whatever they have, it's going to be screened so
Right.
that you can't see it from the,
Right away.
And that was the,
You still will see it from the parking lot, though.
uh,
But you just won't see it from Kingston Pike or
I don't-
any
yeah.
adjacent right-of-ways.
yeah.
Correct.
well, I guess it depends on how much, the vegetation there in the middle, how much that, couldn't that cover it too? On the
Well,
left?
you can't get too wild on those islands because you got to have a visibility triangle when you pull out.
Well, and they could always put it on the Kingston Pike side, and that's already down, you may not.
That's exactly where
You
we
may
are.
not see it at
That's
all.
exactly
That's
where we
what
are
he is
putting it.
doing.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to see it from Kingston
You got a
Pike or
screen
Campbell
wall.
Station.
In this particular
Yeah.
case,
That's right.
Yes, yes, uh-huh.
but there may be some other situation where it would be more visible.
About where that thing is now, where we're showing it, that's probably, and I'm taking a wild guess, but somewhere between 12, 13 feet below Kingston Pike. So, I mean, car's sitting way up here, that thing's sitting down here, and it's got landscaping, as you can see around it, and it's also got a covered trellis-type piece that goes behind it and then kind of goes over the top of it that's kind of a little bit covered. I don't know if do you have that picture by chance, Mark?
And to me,
why don't we make it with a maximum, I'll go 15 if you go to maximum 3 by 5 foot in height. Right now you have a maximum of 6 feet in height, which is really a tall pillar. Theoretically, it'd be 2 feet wide.
I can put it on the screen over here if you want.
Actually, the grade's probably even a lot greater than that.
Absolutely. It's a lot more.
Well, the issue wasn't the visibility from the parking lot as much as it is from the road anyway, right?
Well, to me, item number 3 is going to catch that, because the apparatus, the reader board, the arbor, whatever you want to call it, that to me is part of the drive-through. If that is visible from an adjacent right-of-way, then it doesn't qualify. Mark, is your interpretation the same? If you looked at a drive-through, it's any apparatus that's part of the drive-through constitutes the drive-through, correct?
You had it up there, you just have to turn this thing to.
I don't know that it'll focus on the whole thing.
Turn this thing to make it.
We used it a month. It seems like I was up there a month or two ago. We used it on something. Yeah.
Oh, that goes at a little bit.
Again, Mark, do we consider the reader board, the menu board, as part of the drive-through? So doesn't number 3 catch
Just
that,
a little.
address that concern about being
There you go.
visible?
Okay.
Very good. Maybe just a timing issue. I'm sorry, what was your question?
Is the apparatus, the menu board, that's part of the drive-through? Thus, item number 3 in the ordinance would address that being visible from adjacent right-of-ways. Am I interpreting that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Mr. Myers picked out something that's pretty important. That is not a clear representation of the slope that is there today. It's just
No.
it's an idea just to give you something visually to see, not to be explicit in terms of what the elevation differential is or the slope is either.
Or the scale of the building, for that matter.
Correct, exactly. Yeah, that's a pretty
Like a 4-story building. But again, what Ms. Rita said is we don't necessarily want to be site-specific here.
Yeah.
We want to think about what we're talking about, that and what potentials we could have in other areas, and are we addressing those so that we don't have loose ends in the future?
All parcels on Kingston Pike and Camel Station?
In the MUTC. Which MUTC ends at the Coles line to the west, is that right? And ends at Concord Road to the east? Is that reasonably accurate?
I'm sorry, I'm having
You're
issues
having
with
some issues
the,
multitasking.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, we put it on the overhead and look at the empty. I think that's what Miss Betty was asking
Oh, no,
about.
I just
is-
got that cleaned off now.
Turn it back on.
Not do that.
We're talking about the geographic area of the MUTC. So we're not talking all the way from Lovell Road to Dixie Lee Junction. We're talking an area much smaller than that, but also the core of the town of Farragut.
Right, the part we want to look really nice
That's correct.
and not look like fast food restaurants.
That's right.
I see a real conflict there. It's an oxymoron.
Well, we've struggled with drive-throughs for a long time. I mean, this goes all the way back to the TCD 7 years ago.
That's
How
good.
much time was spent on drive-throughs?
Having a good old time right now. You need to move to the next one. This one's got all the trails on it. Yeah, there. That's right.
There you go.
We don't have it.
Yeah, we're not getting it on our screen for some reason.
What was your specific question?
Well, basically, the purple is what we're concerned about.
Yeah.
We're talking about essentially
Yeah.
from West End and Concord Road all the way to Coles, I believe.
Yes,
And then on the other side, Jamestown Boulevard.
yes.
So that's, if we want to be site-specific, that's the area that we're talking about. Again, what Miss Betty said, this is an important part of the heart of the town of Farragut, and this is something that I said that we've struggled with for a long time with drive-throughs. I think we've come up with a good plan that addresses it and makes it very cumbersome for a future applicant to be able to meet these items. However, it is not guaranteed that we'll never see this again. Unlikely, but not guaranteed.
What about that bank property in front of Fresh Market? It seems to,
That's in the mixed-use town center.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, I think a new tenant's moving in there right now.
Yes.
yeah, but they don't stay there.
Well, you're right. That they've been through a few tenants over the years.
So, isn't that a prime spot for this, for a fast food?
That's not my decision to make. It would be a permitted use.
Well, they would have to jump through the same hurdles with
Yeah.
what we're talking about, and that is a parcel that could be a lot of record. So she's right. I mean, that is a parcel that could be that this could happen. That somebody
But
could
it would
change it
have
from a
to-
bank drive-through to a fast food drive-through.
And where
Would
they
have to meet all the criteria.
have fast food all up and down Kingston Pike and then
Well, I mean, to meet that criteria, it's like Noah said, it's pretty challenging. This is a unique property that is probably one of the few that can really meet it, just because of its topography primarily. Because a lot of the topography hides the drive-through naturally. You don't have that same situation on a lot of these other parcels. It's going to be much more challenging to conceal the drive-through.
Any more questions or comments? Are there any?
I mean,
Where do we end up?
the
12 versus 15.
yeah, I don't think we've given a decision on that.
Problem with 15. To me, it's 3 square feet. They're still going to have to hide it. It still falls within, I don't have an issue with it personally.
Prepared here. I don't have an issue with it either.
So okay. So we can
So-
make the modification, what's before you is a request to approve resolution PC-15-02. Recommends approval of ordinance 15-02. If you want that ordinance to be modified to address the size of the sign, then that certainly is an easy modification that could be incorporated into that ordinance.
Do we do that before we approve the ordinance? Or is a mod?
Could approve the ordinance subject to that change since it's so minor. I mean, we could,
I got an idea that might address some of the heartburn with this. What if we put a size minimum, a parcel size minimum, that would eliminate some of those small, if you want to call them grandfathered parcels that are giving us concern in the future? And all of a sudden, I think this site, I can't remember, but I think it's over 2 acres. And so I was thinking, all of a sudden, if we made a site, and the reason being is we have a history of doing this in the zoning ordinance about having minimums. I mean, ideally, I'd like to say just that corner of Kingston Pike and these 2 parcels, but we just can't. We can't do that. But my thought would be, what if we put a 2-acre minimum size
for the drive-through
for this
option,
drive-through?
and the other parameters.
And these other, so we have items 1 through 6, and maybe we now have a new item number 1 that says parcel shall be a minimum of 2.0 acres. And then I just think that, I think we are now even further making it very difficult to be able to jump through all the hoops that you'd have to jump through to have a drive-through in our MUTC. Just an idea.
Well,
But I'm thinking about some of the parcels that Betty was talking about, and all of a sudden I'm thinking that's probably going to catch, including the old Burger King and the bank, and I can't remember exactly how the Village Green parcel is platted, but I'm just thinking about some of those, and I think that would eliminate a lot of opportunities. And I hate to use the word opportunity, because it really is important to us. Again, we've struggled with it for so long. It is important to us that we don't get just a big national fast food that plops right down in the middle of our downtown. And that's really what we were trying to avoid. We'd love to have the fast food. If they want to do a fast food, they have to do it without a drive-through.
So it's one drive-through per 2 acres? Because could there conceivably be another drive-through in this?
Well, we already have,
plat?
it's only limited to one lane. So item number 2 already addresses that. So if they had 2 coffee houses on the same 2-acre
Right.
parcel, they could only have one drive-through. So I think that addresses it. But if we want to further define it just a little bit tighter, put a 2-acre minimum.
That's something we can do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, we can add that language into item number 1, actually, pretty easily. You can say that the property shall be at least 2 acres and is a lot of record that has existing frontage on a street classified as a major arterial on the major road plan. That'd be,
And we still don't have a definite on the 12 or 15, do we? Whether we're changing that from the 12 to the 15 square feet?
Would it be appropriate should we poll the commission, Madam Chairman? About the 12 to 15?
Somehow we need to make that decision, if that's what we're going to do.
do that. You could ask for a vote for each commissioner to say yea or nay whether they approve of increasing it from 12 to 15.
And we put that in and then do the whole.
And if everybody wants to add that 2-acre requirement to item 1, that's a very easy change to the ordinance as well. Both of those are very simple.
That is a separate parcel, at least what I can tell from the KGAS.org, that small realtor office is a separate small parcel.
Okay, let's go with the polling on the 12 square feet before we lose that.
I'm okay with 15.
I'm okay with 15 also.
I'm okay with it. 5? Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
About trying to be a little less intrusive.
So that gives us a,
He's wanting to discuss the height.
5 feet versus 6 feet. I don't know what's magic about the 6 feet. Because drive through at your car level, you want to be able to looking out or down. I hate these things where you're looking and trying to read small print crammed on a big sign that's high.
I think personally that I think I'm not trying to speak for Mark, but I think what he's trying to attempt to do is that you've got to have some sort of elevation off of the ground.
I understand.
So I don't know what you were trying to do there, Mark, in terms of the 6 feet, but you know, I don't know that there's anything magical about whether it's 3 by 5 or 5 by 3 or anything like that necessarily, but I do think it needs to. You've got to have it up off the ground for somebody sitting in a car to be able to read it as they're sitting there. I would say that.
Yeah, I'm not married to the 6 feet. That's basically just to be consistent with a lot of the height requirements that we have for a number of other signs in the town, regular menu boards, ground-mounted signs, things like that. But Ed's got a good point. You need to think about it from the height of the person in an average vehicle. You know, what will be that best height for these smaller type of menu board signs, and maybe 5 feet would work. I'm fine with
I'm
that.
just bringing it up for discussion.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I thought about it too a little bit when I was, going through this language. I thought 6 feet might be a little high.
I would just request whatever you decide on that you make sure you've got some room for somebody to put that on a stand of some sort, because you can't take a 5-foot menu board if it's 5 feet tall and just set it right on the ground. It wouldn't work.
would this include it or exclude that base?
Yeah, it includes everything. That's the total height, structure, and menu board and everything.
Have any more comments on this? And
I don't have enough experience with menu boards to know. I mean, I guess I'm trying to visualize if you're either you're in a little car or in an SUV, there would be arguments both ways about having a little shorter, a little taller, but.
And it doesn't say you have to make it 6 feet high. I mean, it just can't be higher than 6 feet. If somebody wants to make it 3 feet, that's fine, or 4 feet, whatever. Yes.
About it, if you're in an SUV, I step up into my SUV. So I'm thinking my head is at least 6 feet off the ground in an SUV. So I'm looking down anyway, but I'd look out and I'd be looking over the menu board. I'd have to look down, and so they'd either probably have to tilt the board up so that you can see all of it, because you're not going to be able to see what's at the bottom of that menu board, even if it is 3 feet. I think that might be awkward. I think we're making it very difficult for someone to have a menu board.
Again, I just don't have, I don't have enough experience with design on something like that to know, what is appropriate based on national standards of things like that. I mean, generally speaking, I think having the 6-foot height limitation is appropriate. That's the same thing we use for our ground-mounted signs. And so it's kind of a consistent number on some other things. So, and being that it's screened, and if it's not screened when they're trying to get their CO, then they got to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to screen it from adjacent right-of-ways. And from the other side, it's going to have to be screened with landscaping. I mean, there's some other, so I'm not, I think 6 feet is okay. I would hate to force somebody to a 5-foot sign, and whereas we just don't have enough information to determine that whether or not that's appropriate.
Questions and comments on that?
I have a suggestion. Why don't we get somebody to get in the car and go to all the drive-throughs and with a tape measure?
Is that, we get to use a town credit card on that, Ralph? Oh, we just get to go through the drive-through without buying anything?
Well, the 6 feet's been in place for a long time, and it seems I haven't really had any problems with it. Of course, that was for bigger menu board signs, but I think having 6 feet gives a designer a little more flexibility too on the configuration of the face that could make an actually more attractive sign face. Yeah, it's a good point.
This is a special menu board in a special area, and therefore,
Yeah.
instead of just using something because we used it other places, I just want to see what the discussion was. And so,
Yeah, I think it's a good point, yeah.
Take a
I don't think so. I think we're on 6 feet.
6 feet, okay.
Okay.
So are we ready for a motion here?
You want to poll on the 2 acres to see if that's something that anybody feels like that's important? I mean, to me, I think that would be an important thing, but again, anybody else think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
I'm okay with that.
Take a poll, so we'll start.
I'd like to see the 2 acre minimum.
Yes.
2 acres.
2 acres and 15 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can make those changes very easily.
Okay, and so do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So we'll see you in the mornings for our coffee before long.
This will go, this will be going to the Board of Mayor and Alderman.
Work on that lease now. We'd like
for
to see your
the
building
first
redeveloped.
reading.
And
It-
will it be in the next meeting?
No, it will be in probably the first meeting in March, would probably be the
For the Board of Mayor and Alderman.
But since they've already asked me to do this, I think, they obviously feel that a drive-through is not, inappropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, we're down to item number 8 now. Discussion and public hearing on the Farragut Architectural Design Standards. We had a few changes that we had, or a few things we'd asked them to look more in depth at.
Yeah, and I think Ashley sent you all these questions ahead of time and the modifications that the consultant had made per the discussion last Thursday when they presented the entire document and received some feedback. The change to page 17 was really just kind of a minor thing, really, just cleaning up some language. Basically didn't imply that the planning commission could vary certain things that they don't have the legal authority to vary, was basically the concern. I think, and we can certainly talk about that, but I think the main thing I want to be clear on is, again, that you all are comfortable as being the design review committee for the town, because that will be part of the standards. I've discussed this with Tom Hale today, and we're going to add a little section in the regulatory framework portion of the standards that clarifies what we've already talked about, and that is that the Planning Commission will be, as provided for in Tennessee Code Annotated, you have to designate a design review committee. And we're proposing to designate, as part of these standards, the Planning Commission as that design review committee. You also have to have an appellate body under state law. And in the case of the town, since the Planning Commission would be the design review committee, then that will be the governing body, which would be the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So should someone have a problem with a decision rendered by the Planning Commission in relation to the design review standards, their appeal would go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Some communities have their own design review committee. It's a completely separate body, and others designate other entities. Oftentimes the Planning Commission is not uncommon. And sometimes the Planning Commission is the appellate body to a true design review committee, should a community decide to have a separate committee altogether. So that was clarified in the language that was sent to you all. And then let's look at this masonry question. I think there were some things that came up that were brought up at the meeting last Thursday to make sure we're really clear on what we all think of as masonry, what we would want to see as primary masonry material versus accent material. What the consultants did was took a page with images there, it's on the screen, and provided for different building materials and identified what they think should be a primary masonry material versus an accent material. And then they describe what those different materials would be and show some examples of those. I don't know if you all had a chance to look at that via the email she sent ahead of time, if you have any questions, but I think we just need to be very clear what our expectations are, so that when someone comes in with a project, we know exactly what we expect for that 60% masonry, on the non-ground floor, and 75% masonry on the ground floor of a multi-story building, what we expect that to be. Some of the things that we talked about at the meeting last week were detailed concrete, whether that should be considered a primary building material or just an accent, or both. They're proposing it as both. We talked about synthetic stone, and they're showing that as just an accent material. We had one of the multifamily projects that has been approved through the town basically has synthetic stone, and as they are counting as their significant masonry component on their buildings. That project, as the wording is provided for here, would not satisfy these standards. They would have to do something more in the traditional masonry palette, either brick, stone, true stone, or detailed concrete. So how do you all feel about that? I know we've talked a lot about materials. Are you comfortable with, if someone were to come in, that we would have enough guidance to give them a good decision that we could rely on, and the standards give us enough guidance to support our decision.
I think the A's and P's are genius. I think that's what we needed, that kind of guidance, and it's very clear and concise to me, and I think we've hit the nail on the head.
Okay. And how about the definition of masonry? I think y'all might have looked at that. That was basically not changed, but
I wanted on C,
on this page?
2.17C,
Yes, sir.
second line, where it says, an authenticity similar to that of genuine masonry. I just need to make it stronger than just take out the word similar.
Sure that synthetic masonry materials convey an authenticity similar to that of genuine masonry.
Strike the word similar is what you're thinking, Ed?
That just struck me as being maybe a little loose that people could. Synthetic, but we want it to look as authentic as possible.
That sentence stands on its own, striking the word similar.
Is everybody okay with that?
Grammatically, that's still correct too, isn't it?
Okay.
I think Winter and company did an outstanding job on.
Yeah, they did a good job with these standards.
I have a question. Just when I was pulling up to my building the other day, the Anytime Fitness, and looking at it, I'm not entirely sure that the building as it's built meets these standards. It does have stone, and then it has stucco. But I don't know that the stucco is, and this is a one-story building, is 60%. I mean, the stone is, the stone is a stuck, and he has the opportunity to build 2 more buildings on his property. He just,
Yes.
How are we going to address, because that could look like an eyesore, how do we address that? I guess it's just more, I'm trying to think of future development there.
How to tie the future buildings into the existing building?
Yes.
I think you could do it with brick and then picking up the synthetic stone as an accent.
Yeah, you kind of blend what's there, but then you kind of taper it into the,
Okay, because
That's how I would do it. I would brick and then
Separate.
add the stone that's on your building,
Okay.
move it over as an accent on the other building, and I think they would complement
Yeah.
each other very well.
yeah, I think you could do it very easily.
I just want some clarification because I'm not sure I understand. So when someone's coming in to build a building, can we not just say, here are 5 different primary materials you can use and here are 5 different secondary materials? I know it seems it's like when you're in an HOA.
Right.
And you can only paint 6 colors and you can only have so many. I mean, honestly, I know it seems very limiting, but if we're trying to have a consistent look in the town, there could be so many different exceptions unless we're very specific about what people can and cannot use. So do we not think being that specific do we think it's holding their hands too much? I'm just curious to see why we can't just select these items. Is it because they change? Is it because?
Materials do change with time. There's no doubt about that. And I think, me personally, I don't think we wanted to get into that kind of micromanagement of overbearing on them to force feed certain materials. But we're really trying to give them a tremendous amount of guidance in saying, hey, we really want brick, but we have some other products, a real stone or the detailed concrete, which if you follow that definition of that detailed concrete, is very appropriate. So I think that mostly, to me personally, we didn't want to get into that level of a pallet. And again, when a manufacturer discontinues Garrison red brick, then all of a sudden we're like, oh, we got to go back and do a text amendment change because that particular brick that we really like is no longer manufactured.
And that happens often.
It actually does. Matter of fact, a neighborhood that we did, I pick on Garrison red because that was the color that was originally required. Every house in the neighborhood had to have Garrison red brick. We did not develop the neighborhood. We actually bought the neighborhood during the recession, and we actually went in and changed all the covenants and restrictions. Still have very traditional brick architecture, but again, we didn't want to force feed one particular brick. And I don't think necessarily we wanted that type of monotony in the town. We do want to see some creativity.
No, yeah, absolutely.
And again, if we were all just a small little tight little urban downtown area, I think that would be different. But being that we're trying to do something over a larger area of maybe more urban development that would occur in the MUTC, or urban style development, and then more suburban development that's going to continue maybe towards Dixie Lee Junction or on Parkside Drive or some other areas. But we're just trying to create that theme that is more timeless in the architecture. And again, still allow them some flexibility in their design.
It's just that, you know, people's opinions on what they like and don't like is so subjective. It just seems, I don't know, it just seems to be having more specific guidelines. And I'm with you. You want to give them flexibility. I agree with that. But, you know, again, like we were talking about, well, this particular concrete looks good, but this doesn't. Or this particular masonry looks good, but this doesn't. Well, I might think the opposite of that. So it just leaves a lot of room for a lot of discussion, ambiguity, and so.
I think most importantly, some of the things that have happened over the past, 5, 10, even 30 years, those are the things where really, when we're getting a lot of metal, a lot of ephes or synthetic stucco, and a lot of things that are just really contrary to the theme that we're trying to create. I think generally speaking, I'm sure there's going to be something that slips through the cracks and we go, oh, what were we thinking? But again, if we're not going to have the issues of the ice area. Remember the whole color debacle years and years ago, that it was supposed to be earth tone tan and they painted it blue, and there's these things. I think we're really eliminating those things from happening again. And I think generally speaking, we're going to have a real good architectural theme in the town. It may take 20 or 30 more years to be able to start getting a feel for that theme, but I think this is a heck of a good start. Again, this is a somewhat of a dynamic document that maybe we should revisit every few years and bring new planning commissioners, get them introduced to the document and kind of understand. And there may be an applicant that brings a whole new product that hadn't even been invented yet, and we go, wow, we love that product.
Well, one of the examples is like when we drove by that Fairfield Hotel, the hotel over there by Outlet Drive, and you hated the colors, and I loved them. I thought they looked awesome together. So it's that. I mean, there's that kind of thing. The stone, the color of the stone might be different, and again, very subjective to what your particular tastes are.
But,
So.
it's not a palette that I like, but I'll take that palette over a few other buildings in Farragut that are bright, and I can take a palette of colors that I may not care much for, but the bright ones I'm happy with that.
The staff does feel they've done a great job with the standards. We do strongly recommend approval of the resolution PC-15-03, which does recommend approval of ordinance 15-03. We can make those adjustments, and we do need to add a little language per my discussion with Tom Hale, but it's nothing that we haven't already discussed. It's just some clarifications. But we did want to make sure everybody was comfortable on these materials. But again, it's not a static document. It can be revisited, just like our comprehensive plan. We can revisit it periodically, make adjustments if necessary. But it will give us something a lot better than what we've had in the past. So we've got, I think, a good set of standards here that will make a noticeable difference in the town's appearance and help us implement, our comprehensive plan and various aspects of our strategic plan.
I'd move for approval of the resolution PC 1503, incorporating the discussion, comments, and your follow-on discussion with Tom Hale and his comments.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The next to the final item tonight is discussion and public hearing on establishing meeting rules for the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission. We have discussed the fact that we've had some meetings recently that have gone on and on and on, and we want people to be able to say, I see people back there smiling, but we want the public to have the opportunity to talk. And sometimes they want to say the same thing that somebody else has already said to let us know they really feel strongly about that. And it's not unusual at all to limit The amount of time, if you have seen the, I think it's is it county commission meetings, they do this. So we have come up with a few things here that we wanted you to look at and us discuss briefly to see if how you feel about it. Think that this still allows people to have their say. And if there are any comments about this?
The only thing, I think, sometimes you have people who can't articulate or express themselves very well, but they would like to be recognized and talk for a minute and have 3 minutes left over. I would like to see at least one person be able to transfer some time, not everybody, but say one person to someone else. If they got 5 or 10 people out there.
If that, how difficult is that going to be to keep up with, though?
So you mean if I had 5 minutes and I didn't use my 5 minutes, I could give the 3 minutes I didn't use to somebody else to speak? Oof.
Who, does Ed, the secretary, have to be the timekeeper on this?
Start over again.
You're gonna need a chart to figure out
Well,
who's allocated time.
Maybe we encourage people to prepare their remarks and just read them. I'd rather have somebody be able to read them. If they can't articulate them off the cuff, maybe we invite them to read their
Well, I
remarks.
think some people do, but they get really tense when they get in front of a,
Yeah, it's not easy
or
speaking in front of
whatever.
I think we're going way overboard. I've been on this board for a number of years, and the number of instances where we've had a problem are so, they're not even a tenth of a decimal place in a percentage. And to stifle in any way, I think is a core concept of this town. I, for one, if I want to bring up the citizens forum, who's going to think about signing up in advance just because you want to take a minute or two to say something here? And how many times have we even had somebody even say something at the citizen forum that wasn't the mayor or somebody here, the chairman? I think there's certain things on here we could have as guidelines, but I think to be overly prescriptive, and then we start to track time, I just say, we're out there tilting at a problem that doesn't really exist.
I think generally speaking, I think the rules are a good idea. Probably maybe once every 2 or 3 years is probably the only time that we're going to have to pull the rule sheet back out and maybe inform the audience, hey, these are our rules. And we're probably going to have our chairman's going to have a pretty good idea of which issues are going to be a real challenge that are going to keep us here till midnight.
And that gets back to the role of the chairman and
Right.
keeping order in the meeting. Times where there's been an excursion and so, the only time we really even had one, I think, of any note was when the former chairman happened to have an emotional tie to the issue, specifically. And,
One of my concerns is if we bring that, if we have the stipulations, we've got to use those stipulations all the time.
That's right.
And so I don't want, and we keep time every time. So that would be,
But when you use the word shall and stuff like that, as opposed to having some guidelines, guidelines are one thing, rules with shalls or have a whole different connotation. I mean, who would disagree that speakers must identify themselves by name and address? I mean, that's a convention that we've used ever since I can remember. And generally trying to limit it to 5 minutes, that's the power of the gavel. So, you can feel when it's going on. If they're in the middle of something important, everybody want to hear it. So it's 6 minutes. That doesn't bother me. And I think you can go through these. I don't mind having some guidelines, but when you start saying we're going to have rules and then we're going to track time and share time, I feel like we're on the floor of Congress or something, and I don't want to.
Yielding the floor.
I'll give my remainder of my time to the honorable.
well, and I had some concerns about how personal attacks and some of the motives of differing views questioned and attacked, and malicious comments shall not be tolerated. You would like to think that you're dealing with people that that's not an issue.
Power of the gavel is
Yeah.
strong.
Yeah.
I don't think either of those last two provisions are applicable, or they're nice, but they're not, I don't think they're either justified nor enforceable or any other way.
They may be, right. There may be a few instances where we need that, but, yeah.
But at least this would give the grounds to call somebody out of order. If you have these that are out there, and
But what does that mean when you call someone out of order? Do you just call them on it and?
I think the
and-
chairman has to do it. I don't think I think chairman's the
understand
only
that.
one that can do it.
But what does that mean? What do you do with that?
Great question. I have no idea. I mean, do you put them in the chair in the
Or a
corner? I don't know.
reminder
Send them back there with
You
David.
gotta wear the dunce hat?
You in the corner.
Yeah. I don't know.
Basically being out of order is off topic, you know, when you're no longer
Or the malicious comments. I mean, I could see where
malicious is, you know, but it's really hard, it's difficult to enforce. It's.
What I may think is malicious, you may not, and
Yeah.
vice versa. So that's really hard to define.
I think we have to go with your judgment on it. You're our
Yeah,
chairman.
that's
I
true.
mean, we elected, you know, you're in that position because
Power of the gavel and the chairman is one that really comes down to.
that's right.
So it's all up to you, Rita.
Oh, to me.
You can have a gavel? I don't see one.
No, I don't think so.
We need to get our
If
gavel.
you'll need one. She's got a water bottle. You just throw it.
I may have, if people keep talking more than 5 minutes, I may have to throw it to wake some people up,
There you
but,
go.
Say I've been to the Knox County Commission meetings, and they have that little timer, and honestly, it's very unobtrusive. And people know they've got 5 minutes to speak, and the buzzer goes off. Half the times I've been there,
Yeah.
they don't even make it that far. 5 minutes is a long time, believe it or not. So,
Could do is just announce, I mean, we're gonna have some stuff that's gonna be controversial coming
Sure.
up pretty soon. And, so it might be good just, you know, when you know these things are coming up, just to announce prior to the discussion of that item, to please be cognizant of people's time, and that try to limit your comments to, you know, whatever you think's a reasonable time, and, you know, try to
depends on
stay.
how many people you have. If you have 10 people here,
Just remind people of good meeting etiquette. I mean, you know, you don't want somebody getting up there and rambling on about for 10, 15 minutes, some of which is not even relevant to the
Discussion at hand, yep.
discussion. So if you kind of announce some of those, you know, that just to kind of use some common
my
sense. And
concerns that is addressed here is the fact that somebody in the audience called out one of the applicants. And I was concerned that we need to hear the applicants, and we need to have the time to ask them questions and all. And I don't want us to do anything timing-wise that would limit the applicant.
Applicants.
Right.
But we also don't want people, making personal attacks.
And I've watched a few school board meetings, and they put a little clock up at the top, and it shows you how much time you have left. But most people arrive with a prepared statement that they read because they have the information they want to. And maybe that's something that when people notice it's going to be that kind of meeting, and we're holding them to 5 minutes, they'll start coming in with more prepared statements, which are, you know, always. When you come in with a prepared statement, then you make all your points. You tend not to throw nasty things into it. You're just trying to make your points as accurately as you can. So hopefully, this will be the beginning of people preparing their statements.
How is this going to be used to train people? Would it be something that you would read through all the whole thing, all 7 items? And
At each meeting or something?
when you don't do it every month, do you?
well, one thing I think David mentioned to me is I thought was a good suggestion. You got the agenda back there that people pick up when they come in. You could put some basic, you know, parameters on the back side of
Idea.
that.
Yeah.
And then Rita could announce at the start of the meeting, please refer to the, the meeting etiquette guidelines on the back of your agenda, should you wish to speak on an item before you this evening. And that way they can
Idea.
kind of look through it, be cognizant of what they should and shouldn't do. And, I think that's,
It's a lot easier than Rita having to read through that
Yeah.
every time.
Well, that it's only, there's, when the controversy, when it fills up, that's when you kind of just remind them.
yeah, and you could just announce that, that on the back of your agendas that you picked up, there's some, basic meeting etiquette.
Guidelines.
Are we going to change? Are we going to rename this from meeting rules from meeting
Well, this could be
guidelines?
tweaked and take, certainly the shalls and all that stuff could be removed. We could make it softer and,
Well, I'm inclined to agree that it's hard to define what's malicious, and some of that's a little more subjective. Yeah.
Well, and
It
some
does
people get
kinda-
more sensitive. I mean, I had a guy say something that wasn't very nice to me, but it was just, I didn't find it to be malicious. He was just kind of fired up in the moment. So to me, it didn't bother me. I didn't take offense to it, but again, it really kind of falls back on,
But I think it does remind people before they speak that just to kind of revisit common meeting etiquette, that sometimes you don't think about that. You come here, you're all worked up about something, and, you just kind of throw all that stuff away.
On the other people too.
You have kind of a refresher that, yeah, we know you're upset, but here, you still need to,
Conduct
try to
yourself.
behave yourself and,
I would suggest that you cut down considerably the first paragraph and just mention to be a citizens forum. It'll be roughly 10 minutes set aside for that long, but, and the chairman could extend. All this stuff in between, we really haven't, hardly anybody ever speaks at that. The key part of that is that you really should, I don't think it says it there, is that, and we've always said that the citizens forum is not to be used for an agenda item. So, there's only just a couple of key points. The real focus you want to have is just on the other point.
we could take that citizen forum portion out if you want. That's rarely ever been a
Bogged down
problem.
last month. If you remember Citizens Forum last month, all of a sudden something that we couldn't address all of her
Well, I wasn't
problems.
here, so I guess I missed
So
it.
I guess I am thinking that. Seems
Occasionally that does happen.
It seems like that one sure went a lot longer than 10 minutes, but
Oh, yeah, I
obviously we want to be as transparent as possible. We want folks to have their voice heard, but we don't want to get bogged down in things that we just don't, that we have no ability to fix. Or
Unfortunately, too, you make rules and regulations for those situations that come up that are exaggerated. And, but that's why you make those rules and regulations. Is when something like that comes up.
But you need a trend or a number to deal with this. Always try and use a litmus test to who needs it and why. It's addressing one instance of
Right,
or is it something that's happening with frequency that we need to do something about it?
yeah.
I think I like the.
But having it written on the back and handed out,
Yeah,
but I think
I
it
like
needs to
that.
be reworded.
Yeah.
It's a great start.
Guidelines, and you really just need to put it on the ones, we know when the controversial needs.
Why don't you just take out the part about not transferable to the speakers?
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
what you got to do.
Well, and we don't,
Happen
like
very
we
often.
said, we don't have that very much, but when
Right.
you do,
It can be upsetting.
so obviously the one where they verbally attacked the man from Cannon and Cannon personally was,
That was out of line.
yeah, that kind of situation.
I'll try to soften the wording up and maybe email it to you all, let you look at. Like, for example, maybe just say instead of all comments shall be directed to the chairman, please address all comments to the chairman or something, just and then more of a guidelines and and this, I don't know what to do about the citizen forum thing, because it's rarely ever an issue, but occasionally there is that situation like last month where somebody speaks to you all, and you all have no way of addressing their, or remedying their problem. But, and it goes on for a fairly long time. So I don't know what you do about that.
Well, and I hesitate to cut people off. I don't want to just cut somebody off. That's,
If they're starting to repeat themselves, that's where you can make a gentle.
Yeah.
Nudge and just,
Sounds subtle.
I think just generally having some guidelines that are on the back and we refer
Yeah.
to them every so
And
often.
announce those at
I
the
mean, I
start
think
of the
that's going to probably
meeting.
eliminate 90% of them because people are going to say, okay, let me just take the emotion out of this, stick to the facts, my concerns, whatever they are. But I think just having that gentle reminder on there, I think that's going to, I think we'll see a big improvement. Not that we have a problem with this, but occasionally these things come up.
okay, so he's going to work on that for us. And number 10, public hearing on proposed location of new utilities.
Oh, we didn't have any.
I have one thing I wanted to bring up, it's a miss that you didn't bring it up before. We went through the stormwater ordinance a month or so ago, approved it, sent it up to the board, and I know the board was made aware that the TDEC is now is willing to grant an extension of a year for making them applicable, like, and we're ready to go in May. And, I guess, no, every time somebody gives you an extension, you always want to take it. But what I'm kind of concerned about is that we're starting significantly new subdivision development and that sort of thing. And since we're ready to go, I'm not really certain that it's a good idea.
We don't have to extend it, is that correct?
That's correct.
And we've already passed it on from here,
Yes.
and it, has it all,
Because it only happened last Thursday, they got made aware of it, and I know that, I guess you were made, at least I was told you guys were made a bit aware of it at the board of mayor and alderman. Is that right?
Yeah, we know the situation.
Yeah, but anyway, what I'm just expressing my personal comment, but I think since we're all involved in it, that we ought to think about whether it really wants to be extended or not, and then make our thoughts known to.
oh, okay. Pass that on. But as far as the town is concerned, we are ready to go with it, and it's all been approved, and it will be implemented. Okay. So no utilities at this time?
No. That's it.
Yeah, just lots of repairs, right?
Yeah, right.
The Farragut 19th, 2015 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission is adjourned. Yeah, just.
oh, yes, you did.
December